What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Early Read BetSide's college football betting show. I'm your host, Reed Wallach, joined today by Parker Fleming of BetUS, CFBGraphs.com, and you've probably seen his advanced game previews. You can follow him on Twitter at StatsOwar for every single game preview on the weekly college football slate. Parker's one of the best in the business. Pumped to have him on. Parker, how's it going?
Reed, I'm doing great, man. Thank you for the kind words and thanks for having me on. It is an absolute joy and shock to me that I get to talk about college football and work in college football and do all this stuff. So always happy to talk and just love that I get to do it, you know?
Yeah, I'm pumped to have you on, and trust me, we are putting you through the grinder this week. We got a huge show talking week 5. I mean, this is kind of like the official start of conference play, in my opinion. We've had a little sampling so far, but we got top 10 showdown, North Carolina State, Clemson this week. That's going to be our marquee matchup. We're also going to talk Oklahoma and Parker's beloved TCU Horned Frogs game coming up in a little bit. But first, we're going to talk some contender, pretender for that 4th college football playoff spot. So loaded show today. We have a lot to get to. A little bit of housekeeping from last week. Early read bets go 6-3, improving to 17-15 on the year. 7 of the 9 bets were worse on game day than they were when given out on the show on Tuesday. 2 of them were the same in Clemson and Rutgers. Neither of them got home, but 7 of the 9 were ahead of the market. So it pays to watch live on Tuesdays. But listen, you're only as good as your most recent bets. So we have plenty of bets to get to. So Parker, let's start though. College football playoff preview. I think we could agree in some order. It's Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State. Those 3 are very, very likely to be in the college football playoff. The 4th spot's a little up in the air, and we saw Oklahoma go down last week. Clemson hung on. They have another crazy matchup this week. The 4th spot seems very up in the air, so I want to play a little contender pretender with you with 3 teams that I think are, I'll say, live for different reasons to make the college football playoff. So we're going to get to them in the marquee matchup, but Clemson, I think, is the first team we have to discuss. DJ Uiagalelei, maybe starting to figure some things out as a passer. Doesn't look super fluid back there, but the offense is looking better this year than last. The defensive line is still fantastic. Where do you stick with or stand with Clemson? Are they a contender, or is this a team that's fake goods?
I think they're absolutely a contender. They're trending upwards in the right direction. Full disclosure, I have a Heisman ticket with some very little money, but just a fun. Hey, might as well. You know, I could see the redemption story for DJU, and they are able to run the ball a little bit better. I think that only lifts them up. I have them about 14th in EPA, expected points added margin, just a down-to-down efficiency measure, and they've been pretty balanced. Last year they had a really bad, just a ton of negative plays. DJU had the one of the lowest total EPAs. I think -35 expected points he was worth last season. So they're definitely figuring that out a little bit. Pass defense does worry me. The rush defense is so good though. I think that they're able to really get away with a lot on that back end. And it was really encouraging last week that they did kind of, have the game where the defense was struggling and the offense overcame and they dropped 50 points and won that game in overtime. So I think they're for real. I think their schedule's not great, but I think they really, in my mind, kind of have that claim to that 4th spot. Just the way their schedule is going to break and the way that they're going to line up with how they're figuring out some things on offense.
Yeah, I agree. I think the offense definitely on the upswing. There are some questions. I'm just not sure if the ACC, if there's going to be a challenger that could maybe knock them off the pedestal and open the door for another team. So do I put Clemson in the top 3 group? Probably not, but are they at the top of the rest fighting for that 4th seed? I think so, at least heading into this one. And, anyone who's watched the early read knows I have very strong thoughts on USC, but we have to discuss them as a college football playoff contender. They are undefeated. They survived, but did not cover against Oregon State last week. USC, I'll give my thoughts after, but Parker, as someone who breaks down and, really gets into the nuts and bolts of college football, what do you see with this team? Because I see, and I think a lot of people are catching on to it, plus 14 in turnover margin. Caleb Williams struggling last week on the road. I think they play from behind the sticks a lot. The aggressive play calling, I think, helps their cause because they do have a lot of talent to, pick up 4th downs and such. But is this team for real, or do you think that this is a team that's, going to get picked off out during one of these Pac-12 games?
I had USC under 9.5 as one of my best
we're there.
totals this season. And statistically, I just, try just a little model that looks at year over year versus success, takes into account continuity, coaching continuity, all that. And USC, I think, them getting over 9.5 wins would just be a statistical oddity. The couple of things that lead me to think that they're a little bit fake is a strong word, but I like it. They are plus 3.5 a game in turnover margin. That's obviously unsustainable. They haven't committed a turnover. That's unsustainable. It also shows that they're not letting Caleb Williams be aggressive enough. Actually, there's a little bit of a trade-off. You would like for them to be a little bit more aggressive on offense, maybe take some more risks, but they're not taking a lot of risks. That's why they're not turning it over. Their defense really worries me. We have a huge split between their efficiency in pass and rush. I have them 13th in raw EPA per pass, 123rd in EPA per rush. When you have such a big split, you have to think selection, right? That doesn't mean that their pass defense is 13th overall. That means that their run defense is so bad, no one's passing against them unless they absolutely have to, because why would you? You can move the ball rushing. So as they encounter teams that are a little more competent in the passing offense, I think that their defense is really going to get spread thin. And we've seen that they're playing a lot of conservative offense. They're really just trying to, minimize variance around Caleb Williams and, not really taking many shots. So I think they're due for some turnover regression. The USC 4 turnover game against Utah, I think I saw someone in the chat right there, is going to be hilarious. Yeah. I do think that with one loss, they could win the Pac-12 and maybe get into that spot, but they would need some help from some other teams. I think that the turnover regression, the split on defense, the way their offense hasn't clicked yet, we're seeing this first year of a coach, even with talent, really does take some time to gel. I'm going to say that I don't have them anywhere near the playoff right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think they lose to Utah on the road, and then they're due for a stinker. Like, it's where everything goes wrong. Because last week against Oregon State, and we won't get too far into last week, but I mean, if it wasn't a turnover, it was Oregon State moving the ball down the field. I mean, USC picks up their own fumble in their own 1-yard line, and then they go 99 yards. So I think that turnover regression is coming. Like I said, plus 14, best in the country by, I believe, 5 turnovers. They've generated a turnover on more than 30% of their defensive possessions. I think that this team is kind of just running on smoke here, and I don't love it. Caleb Williams is a fantastic player. He's still inexperienced. This is not a guy who's going to come in as a proven commodity. He still has some growing pains to play through. I'm not sold on USC. We'll see. That Utah game, I think the market's catching up to him. I think Utah's going to open heavier than people are expecting, two top 10, two top 15 teams playing. One other team I want to get your opinion on, though. They won the game of the week last week. Tennessee. I know it got a little bit closer towards the end. Offense is amazing. That lightning fast, frenetic pace Josh Heupel likes to play with. Hendon Hooker, Heisman odds go through the roof. They're now 16-1 at consensus sports books. They're on a bye this week, but then the schedule gets legit. They get at LSU, then Alabama at home. Are you buying Tennessee? I think they've almost replaced Texas A&M as that kind of third SEC team be in the mix maybe. Is Tennessee for real, or is this more like New Year's 6 is the ceiling for the Vols?
I think just being in the SEC East and having Alabama as your rival means you're going to have to beat Alabama twice to get to the playoff here. Just that's going to happen. You're going to have to win 2 of 3 versus Alabama and Georgia to be a 1-loss fringe contender. I think that is just too much of an uphill climb here. I really like Tennessee. I think their game against Georgia last year was really instructive. They came out and they scored on their first drive. And they're really good at that first punch. Heupel's got a really good mind, but then I think that they really struggle to kind of counter punch. I think we saw that in the second half against Florida, that they know what they're good at. They don't necessarily have a good counter punch to be able to kind of come back with that. I have them as 7th in my EPA per play margin, but again, there's a huge gap from kind of 1 to 3 down to 7 to 30 are very similar there as well. So I also had Florida projected for 24 points against Tennessee last week. So I had like Tennessee 36, Florida 24. And so Tennessee actually did a little worse than I projected. So I think that they're a very good college team. I think Heupel is doing the right things, organizing his offense, protecting his quarterback. They've got some explosive fun. Cedric Tillman's a really great wide receiver. The schedule issues and the fact that, that they've underperformed a little bit against Florida team that my model doesn't really love. I don't know that playoff is really what we're talking about in Tennessee. I think we're talking about a solid New Year's 6 win and kind of seeing where we go from there.
Yeah, I like that. Really, really good team, but not, again, part of that big 4, that top 4. So I think that's interesting thoughts on Tennessee, but I do think we're going to be talking about this team as the season goes on. Again, that big game against Alabama coming up. I think this team is going to be in some big games. I'm excited to see what Josh Heupel and Hendon Hooker could do. If you guys have any questions, though, we're about to hit on a bunch of different games over the next 20, 25 minutes. But if you have any questions, comment them below. We will get to them at the end of the show. But we're going to get now to our marquee matchup. Clemson, North Carolina State. Clemson, I mean, we got to talk about, obviously, the weather at hand, but Clemson sitting around like a -6.5 favorite. Total now at 40.5. Of course, Hurricane Ian is tearing through the South right now, has left a lot of uncertainty on this game. So, Parker, I don't know if you have a lot of conviction in the play we're about to give out, but I do think that there's a lot of uncertainty. The spread and total has been moving kind of all over the first since this has opened since Sunday. So we'll get into that. But I guess let's talk about NC State first. Two, I would say, competitive games so far against Texas Tech. NC State had that one in control, and then ECU, they obviously had to really pull that one out in week 1. What do you make of the Wolfpack? Because I know the expectations were as high as they've ever been in Raleigh this season.
Yes. So what I will say, all of my numbers are insured against injuries. They are aggregate team numbers. They're not at the player level. So, you take that into account, and acts of God, right? So I'm not accounting for projections of hurricanes in my game. So do with that what you will. This is, again, just saying the average team with this statistical profile versus the average team with this statistical profile. What do we think is going to happen here? So that being said, I do think that NC State is good. I think that Devin Leary is a fine quarterback. I think that kind of the offseason content machine really was searching for, breakout teams, and NC State got identified to the point of being overrated. I think that they got overhyped. But that being said, a top 25 team is still very good for an NC State program. I think we get lost with the Alabamas and the Clemsons and kind of their consistent success like that. Like most college football teams, every 3 to 4 years, you're going to be in the top 25, and you just hope the bottom doesn't fall out while you build up your development cycle. NC State, absolutely there. I have them at 20th in my in EPA margin adjusted for opponent. Clemson at 14th. I look at this as NC State 30, Clemson 34. If you're kind of doing the transitive property, which doesn't always work, I think NC State's defense is significantly better than Wake Forest's defense. I think their offense is a lateral step at best. It's definitely different. They're going to try and run the ball more. They're not going to have those elite downfield receivers like A.T. Perry to get to and kind of stretch Clemson out. So I think that while their quality might be the same as Wake Forest, their matchup against Clemson is kind of a step back there. So I have a slight lean towards NC State covering, just because I think the total will be a lot lower than it was last year. I mean, I saw 42.5 this morning. So I like NC State to cover this.
Yeah, it's dropping. I mean, this total, it seems like people are buying into this hurricane. I mean, obviously we're not weathermen here, so we're not trying to protect the weather, but it seems like people are banking on high winds, rain, kind of a slop fest here.
Yeah, so that going into it would only say, let me take the dog in a low total here as well, with getting almost a touchdown. But inside that 7 points, I mean, I have this about 4.5 for Clemson, so I'm comfortable with any number above that. I'm going to take NC State here. I think that their defense will, and Clemson's defense will both create really long sustained drives, and we'll get a low total here. So I'm going to go with the underdog.
Yeah, I think you're looking in the right direction. I think it's interesting. You said it was 34-30 in your model projections, correct? So you were expecting kind of a higher scoring game, obviously weather independent of what's going on, because I was waiting. I actually projected this even higher. I was thinking over when the total first came out. Obviously, the weather comes into play. It went through a key number of 41, so I played very small over 40.5. Again, this is not like my most confident one. Maybe wait for the weather. I wanted to go light just to have a position in on there. NC State's defense, I think, is being a little overrated, and I think your model might be hitting at it too. I mean, against ECU and Texas Tech, both of them outgained the Wolfpack in that game. And I think you could see, I know the game script may have helped with that, but I think you're going to see maybe a few more points, especially even at 40.5. If the teams could just move the ball. I mean, this total is so low. Both offenses are above average, in my opinion. We're just talking about Clemson maybe figuring some things out. And they're allowing more than 5 yards per play. It's outside the top 40 nationally. I think that Devin Leary, especially if they're going to play in a negative game script, they're 6.5-point underdogs. Maybe he has to throw a little bit, assuming weather. I think that this could get over a really low total. I think something in the neighborhood of like 27-21 Clemson, even if it's raining, I think that's very possible. I think that this is just too low of a total, and two offenses I actually rate pretty highly. And I think NC State's defense is not as good as people were hyping up in the preseason. I think you make a great point. Last year, I was all in on NC State. They had like a win total of 6.5. This year, I think it was like an 8.5 juice to the over. It was too high for me. I had to sell that stock. So I think that NC State, they could keep it close, especially if the weather's going to keep it there. But I think this total is too low now, assuming the teams could actually see in front of them. So yeah, there is our marquee matchup. NC State Clemson. I'm going on over 40.5. Go small here though. Wait to see some more weather later in the week. But Parker, he's going NC State plus 6.5. Great rationale there on our ACC game of the week. We're now going to move on to, though, Parker, your beloved TCU Horned Frogs. They are hosting Oklahoma, who got upset as 2 touchdown favorites against Kansas State at home last week. I think that honestly took some of the value out of the spot. I was really looking forward to TCU backing them here. I'll get into my handicap of this game, but I'm high on TCU. I bet them to win the Big 12. I have their over win total 6.5. So I buy this TCU team and had this spot circled as this is kind of like those swing games where I think TCU is live. You know TCU better. Did you go to school there?
I did. Yeah, I'm an alum. I did undergrad at TCU.
Okay, so a TCU alumni here. Are you going with the Horned Frogs here, or are you going with Oklahoma?
I'm going to go with Oklahoma here, and I promise that's not reverse jinx mojo. That's not, just looking at this objectively. I think the spot for Oklahoma makes a lot of sense. Very frustrating loss last week for them, and a couple times they went to that 2-minute drill and were able to move the ball really well, and just kind of felt like they lollygagged. They let Kansas State come out emotional, and they dug themselves a 14-point hole and still had a chance to win it at the end there. So I think that Oklahoma is going to be fine. I think it's going to be a little bit weird to have a defense forward Oklahoma team. Their offense with Dylan Gabriel definitely has some holes, but Marvin Mims is a great receiver. I think he's leading the Power 5 in yards per route run, so super productive every time he gets out there. TCU, I think, is important to look at kind of how they split. I have them at 15th in raw unadjusted EPA margin. That goes to the 30s when you adjust it for opponent. They really have not had a good opponent, and we saw some proof of concept with their offense against Tarleton State and in like 3 drives against SMU. But TCU really turtled up there. They broke open a couple big runs that saved them at the end. The passing offense really couldn't get downfield at all. Max Duggan had an average depth of target under 6 yards. So even as he's completing yards, they're definitely having to tailor the offense to him. Quentin Johnston not getting the ball at all for TCU. That is just astounding. He is under 2 yards per route run. Really, really not productive at all. They can't find a way to get the ball to their best player. Chandler Morris might come back this week, but Max Duggan's going to start. So that, who knows, TCU might pull the plug and try and get Morris in there and see if they can get the ball downfield. But I'm really not optimistic about their kind of sustained drive success. Also on defense, I think they had a couple plays where they just got absolutely beat when they had to, in obvious passing situations, they had to drop 8. They weren't getting any pressure. And I think if Tanner Mordecai and, 1 or 2 to SMU receivers can kind of stretch you out, Oklahoma with Mims and multiple options there is going to be that much more. So I think TCU wants this to be a shootout. I would lean towards an over, total. If you can get that under 70, I'd lean towards an over there. But I think Oklahoma wins this by more than a touchdown, especially if you can get it at 7, not 7.5. I like Oklahoma in this spot.
All right. Well, I'm going with the Horned Frogs. We might need to change alumni here. I might be the TCU backer here. So I took TCU. You could get this at 6.5. That's where I got it. So you could actually do better than that. I make this game Oklahoma 4. And again, I came into the season high on TCU, and I know that they haven't been challenged as much, but I think the explosive plays of the Horned Frogs could really make a difference here. 11th in explosive pass, 6th in explosive rush, and Oklahoma's defensive line, I think, a little bit of a concern here. We saw Kansas State move the ball at will and kind of keep Oklahoma at bay in that second half. The Sooners made some big plays, and Adrian Martinez came right back. And Parker, I know you know TCU probably inside and out. I like Max Duggan more than Chandler Morris. I agree with that move to Duggan. I think he's looked great out there. And I think he could do some Adrian Martinez-like things on the ground and kind of keep the chains moving. I also think high total like this, I think TCU is live backdoor cover at the end of this game. They're going to play till the bitter end here against a conference foe. I think this is a lot of points to lay. I think you could see something similar even to the Clemson-Wake Forest game. Not necessarily in terms of like skill position and everything, but just how that game played out, going to overtime, game lands 6. I like taking this many points with an explosive TCU offense. As we see a TCU question came across the screen there. I'll make sure to hit that. Darrell Turner checks in. He likes TCU to win the Big 12, I guess, and UCLA to win or we're going old school maybe, Pac-10. I know we're going to get to UCLA in our next segment, but I like TCU to hang around this game. I just think the back door is going to be wide open. come the end of this game. So give me 6.5 with the Horned Frogs there. I'll be the TCU supporter for you, Parker. So you could bet with them, and I'll be the emotional one. But yeah, there's our Oklahoma TCU marquee matchup. We did 2 special ones there. So I'm taking TCU with the points, Parker, Oklahoma with the points. We're going head to head there. Kind of weekday football, getting back into our lives here. Kind of slowed up for a little bit. We're back here. So we're bringing back the appetizer segment. Our weekday best bet. Get us started early. Parker, I know you're looking, or we're both looking Friday. You're looking late night, though. So why don't you tell us about Washington, UCLA? Kind of, I would say, our biggest Thursday, Friday game of the week.
Yeah, kind of shocked this one was on Friday, but maybe that'll get some more eyeballs on it. And that's a different, thing entirely. I love what Washington's doing with Michael Penix, man. I think that for years I was so high on him at Indiana and just saying, surely the pressure can't get worse. I think my fact was from 2019 to 2020, Michael Penix had the biggest jump in percent of dropbacks pressured of any college football quarterback since I had data for. Like, just an absurd situation there. He's got time at Washington. They're finding ways to move the ball consistently. He's very good. I think that that's just a lot of fun from a college football standpoint. They're very efficient on offense. UCLA, I think, has played really well against pretty mediocrely against a pretty bad schedule. I don't know. I have them at 10th in raw EPA. When you adjust that for opponent, they go to 55th in the Power 5. Okay. So I think that I'm a little bit lower on them and kind of their quality of opponent here. I like Washington by almost a touchdown from my power ratings here and the way that they've been able to move the ball consistently. I don't know that UCLA will be able to pass as consistently as they want to against Washington. I also think that some of Washington's aggregate statistics are a little bit need to be adjusted for game state. You look at the touchdowns they gave up against Michigan State. Some of those are effectively garbage time. And so their numbers are drawn up a little bit, but even with that baked in, I really like Washington on the road here. I think that they have one of the quickest turnarounds in college football. They're really primed to play solid defense. And with Penix in this offense, I mean, they can move the ball with anybody.
Yeah, Washington's first road game of the season, true road game. So I wonder if that's going to come into play. And if you remember, Kalen DeBoer, the head coach of Washington, came from Fresno State. He actually went to UCLA last year and pulled an upset with Jake Haener in the famous Jake Haener, I think it was his hip, where he points to the sky because he can't even walk, slinging around at 2 a.m. Eastern time. So Parker going with Washington, laying the 3 on the road. We'll see how that goes. That's definitely going to be the marquee matchup. And Darrell checked, and he said another over with Washington, UCLA. I think, there's going to be points there. I think you're going to see both teams kind of move it with DTR, especially. Guy's a human highlight reel. So my Friday night game, I'm interested in what you have to say on this, Parker. Middle Tennessee State hosting UTSA. I'm going to take the points with the Blue Raiders. And this really comes down to, from head coach Jeff Traylor, said to press this week, it couldn't be a worse time to play a Friday game with our injury situation. Last week, they actually transitioned 2 defensive linemen to the offensive side of the ball. They are absolutely gutted on the offensive line. And I know the offense is humming with Frank Harris and stuff, but their defense is really a big concern. Have allowed 38 or more to all 3 FBS teams. And then Texas Southern put up 24 against them last week in kind of a tune-up game. It's a short week. I know Middle Tennessee, maybe there's a letdown after beating Miami, but they didn't just beat Miami in a fluke. They took it to Miami. I mean, outgained it by 140 yards, held them to 1.58 yards per carry. I mean, this Middle Tennessee State team, since getting just absolutely blitzed by James Madison week 1, has been fantastic. Scored 30 or more in 3 straight games, including Miami on the road. I just think +4, I make this inside of 3. I'm not crazy about UTSA this year anyway. The defense is a concern. I like the home dog here, especially with that offensive line concern. Parker, what do your numbers say about that?
Yeah, I think the injuries go a lot into this, and the spot matters for MTSU. I actually have upgraded a little bit UTSA from what I expected this season. I expected a bigger drop off than they were, but that also comes from, we're settling into, okay, Houston wasn't as good, so a close game against Houston might not mean as much, and kind of figuring that out. I do like Frank Harris. I think he's absolutely an underrated quarterback here, and Rick Stockstill has MTSU playing well and playing disciplined. They're 17th in rush rate over expected, so very aggressive in early downs. UTSA is the same. They're 13th in rush rate over expected. So 2 very aggressive teams. I think passing defense will matter a lot. UTSA's has been slightly worse, but against a better schedule than MTSU, even including that Miami. If you look at the total yards, I mean, MTSU had 2 touchdowns of over 70 yards, right? And so those 2 broken plays, I tend to think that, they did outgain by Miami by a lot, but a lot of that can be explained on 2 plays. I don't know if that necessarily reflects the magnitude of the difference between those as much as it does some positive variance. So I'd expect a little bit of regression from MTSU. My numbers have this closer to 7 for UTSA. But injuries and all that, I don't have a play here just because I am a little bit worried about, 1, some weather issues, and then 2, with UTSA, these injuries in a short week, I just don't know what's going to be on the field.
Yeah, Darrell checking in. He loves Frank Harris. I like Frank Harris too, but not to win by 4 on the road against the Blue Raiders. So there's our 2 appetizers for this one. I'm taking Middle Tennessee +4 against UTSA. Parker's going with Washington -3 on the road against UCLA. So now we'll get to some more underdogs. Why not? Parker, I know you're looking Big Ten. I don't know if you can see behind me. Where am I going? Right here. I got a Wisconsin. I'm a Wisconsin alum here. You're looking at this game, Wisconsin laying 7 against Illinois. My Badgers got absolutely decleated by Ohio State is probably a nice adjective to put in there. Game was over within 3 minutes. How are you feeling about them this week against Illinois?
Yeah, I almost don't penalize them too much for doing exactly what we against one of the deepest wide receiver rooms. I feel like we've said that for like the last 6 years that Ohio State has the deepest wide receiver room that we've seen. But legitimately, I mean, just a ton of dudes there. Really, really, really talented, 3 or 4 deep of just absolute first-round NFL guys. No one can defend that. Washington does have some issues this year. I'm really worried mostly about their imbalances. So on offense, 12th in EPA per rush, but they're rushing, 49th least out of anybody in the nation. So they are being a little more aggressive just because of game state. They're 115th in EPA per pass. The negative plays with Graham Mertz, man. If I'm Illinois and defensive coordinator Ryan Walters, I want to line up in such a way that Graham Mertz has to throw 50 passes against me, right? I want to take those odds that he's not going to beat me through the air. And so that big split, I think Illinois has been really good in passing, 2nd in EPA per pass, 27th in EPA per rush on defense for Illinois there. So I think that they'll be able to frustrate Wisconsin's offense. I think they're going to load the box and try and invite Graham Mertz to throw. I don't know if he's going to be able to capitalize on it. Also, Wisconsin has had some really bad issues with 3rd and 4th down success. I have them at 124th, whether that's, adjusting that for situation. They've been in 3rd and longs often, or they just haven't been able to capitalize. That speaks to me as some unsustainable offense. So what little offensive success they have had has been against bad competition and has been, really, really struggling to move on 3rd downs. Illinois 5th and 3rd and 4th down success. They've really tightened that up. I have a lot of respect for Ryan Walters. And then on the other side, Wisconsin's defense is 3rd in EPA per pass, but they're 51st in EPA per rush. So again, a big split. You think selection. I think Illinois with Chase Brown is really balanced. He's one of those involved players in college football. He can get it through the air and get it on the ground. They'll be able to kind of keep Wisconsin honest and exploit both of those units, maybe make both of them a little bit more efficient. The only critique I really have of Illinois' offense for what it is, right? I have it rated 70th out of everybody, so I'm not, making claims. The biggest concern I have is they're not very good at finishing drives. I have it at 3.67 points per quality possession. But Wisconsin has been really bad about that. They've given up some touchdowns. They've done that. They're 119th on defense. So the matchup really seems that Illinois should be able to keep this in a low-scoring game, should be able to keep this straightforward. I really think Illinois should be in a position to win this game with the ball at the end of the 4th quarter. Yep. I am going to go with Illinois to cover 7, and I think there's no shame, no adverse effects to sprinkling some money on the money line here as well.
Yeah. Graham Mertz laying points against quality competition, never a good thing. But listen, these are the times you want to probably take an underdog on the money line. Total 42.5, 43. You make some great points about Wisconsin's offense, but also Illinois, they want to run the ball. They want to attack on the ground. They're not trying to air it out and get into a shootout. So I agree. I think Illinois can hang around this game. And Illinois has beaten Wisconsin in the past. Coming off, listen, this is a team that lost to Washington State already. The season's already trending in the wrong direction. This could be kind of a fatal blow. I've been kind of saying it wouldn't shock me if Paul Chryst is out of a job at the end of the season, depending on how it shakes out. So, again, it just might be going stale there. So, I don't hate it at all.
Fast, man. That's wild.
Yeah, listen, something's got to change there because it's either Graham Mertz got to go and this team has to attack through the portal, or there needs to be a new man in charge because it's starting to run a little stale here in Wisconsin. And I know we're all getting frustrated watching us just not even look like we're capable of staying on the field with Ohio State. Forget losing, just getting absolutely embarrassed like that. So I don't hate the play at all, even as a Wisconsin alum. My play, looking at another low total, I'm going to take Navy This line started coming down this morning at 14. This is the last spot I'll buy it at. My numbers make it 16, but I think you almost need to kind of add some qualitative analysis to the play because it is two service academies. I had my friend Cody Malstrom from Action Network look this up. Since 2005, in service academy versus service academy games, the underdog is 30, 20, and 1 against the spread. And now we're getting 2 touchdowns. The total's in at 37. So, low total is not going to be a lot of points. I know Air Force has been blitzing some poor teams, but Navy's defense has actually held up very nicely. Top 20 in defensive line yards. They're top 5 against the run. They know what's coming in this Air Force offense. I mean, it's triple option versus triple option. So maybe something clicked for this Navy offense off the bye week. They go to ECU and beat them in overtime. Air Force's defensive line, not great, 89th in line yards. So maybe Navy could get a bit of a push there. It's a 10 a.m. local start in Colorado Springs. I just think 2 touchdowns or more, you got to just take a shot here on the underdog, because one quality drive from Navy, it might be enough to just be good. You're okay there. As Jerry Friedman checks in on the chat, says early readers support the Service Academy dogs responsibly. I think you got to take a shot here because one drive might be enough to get this cover home. Again, my numbers say Air Force, but I think you got to really just kind of think about this game, looking at it, not on a spreadsheet, but on kind of how this game is going to break down. So yeah,
I like this. I like this spot a lot. I think that what I said on the BetUS show earlier today was like blind, not knowing who these teams are or what this game is. I think Air Force, I had them at 17. So I was like, that's a fine bet. But you've got to incorporate kind of the situation here and the fact that the total, this morning I saw a total of 37.5. Yeah, 7-17 wins this game for you. I mean, for betting Navy. So I think it's really smart. I think that, the Service Academy games, I'm a little scared of a double-digit dog in these games, especially Navy getting some good mojo last week. I think that's smart.
Yeah. So there are 2 underdog bets, 2 low total ones. Parker going with Illinois catching 7 against Wisconsin. I am taking Navy plus 14 against Air Force. And then our last segment of this show, we're going to do our main event, our late night bet. Neither of them happening too late this week. Kind of a lower West Coast card this week. But Parker, I have interest in this matchup as well. So talk to me about Duke, Virginia. Maybe we're being aligned here.
Virginia is so sad to me just because I like Brennan Armstrong so much. He's a fellow redhead and their offensive line is terrible. He and Keontae Thompson are such a good 2-man combination. And it just shows you you need an offensive line in college football, and the offensive coordinator drop off, I think is huge for losing Robert Anae there. I'm going to go with Duke here. I think Riley Leonard is an electric quarterback. I think Mike Elko has Duke coached up really well. They're a lot better ahead of schedule of where I thought they would be. 24th in raw EPA per play margin. Virginia is 77th. So, we adjust that. It's not going to land super great. Virginia's defense has been much better than its offense, but even its defense, 66 against the pass. I think Duke will absolutely be able to challenge that. Move the ball consistently. I'm going to take Elko and Duke here with a couple of points. I think that they should win this against a very volatile and a little bit underwhelming Virginia team.
Yeah, Virginia is an auto fade here. I like Duke. I think Duke actually played pretty well against Kansas. I know they lost by 8, but I think they acquitted themselves very well in that game as an underdog in a tough spot. I like Duke as well. I'm going to be on this with you with Duke under a field goal, I think is the play. I'm going with a road team, though, as my bet. And this got steamed up yesterday. I still like it because I make San Jose State north of a 3-point favorite. I make them closer to 3.5, 4 points against Wyoming. This Wyoming team is not very good. We're just talking about Virginia. This Wyoming team is actually very, very bad on a grander scale. They beat Tulsa in a crazy game, but they've been lifeless against competent teams. And I bet San Jose State, I threw some pizza money on them to win the Mountain West. And this might be opening up nicely for them. The defense has been fantastic this season. They played Auburn on the road. I know it was a look-ahead spot for Auburn, but they only allowed 24 points. That was the most they've allowed all season. And now Siobhan Cordero starting to come into his own. They just blitzed Western Michigan at home last week. Maybe some good mojo here. And just look at last year. Cordero, he's a Hawaii transfer, went to Wyoming. They won 38-14. He combined for over 400 yards and 4 scores. This guy runs hot and cold, but if he's hot, he's going to tear up this Wyoming defense that couldn't stop Jaron Hall last week. I know Jaron Hall is fantastic, but this Wyoming pass defense can be had. They're bottom 20 in EPA per pass, and Cordero's starting to turn that on. Last week, 76th percentile in EPA per dropback. San Jose State's defense is going to be the best unit on the field. Below a field goal, or even at a field goal, -3, I'll put it on the show as. I like San Jose State to cover here. I think that they're the better team, and they get this Mountain West victory. So there's kind of our late night plays. Two small favorites. Parker going with Duke -2, and I'll be taking San Jose State on the road against Wyoming. Get those questions in for, at the end of the show. I'm just going to hit Parker really quick. Just three more bets. I'm going to go rapid fire here. Just the best of the rest. Oregon Stanford over 63.5. Bo Nix is slinging it all over, and I'm not really sure about this Oregon defense. I know their numbers might be a little skewed because of the Georgia slaughter, but they're 94th in defensive success rate. So even if you want to, give them a little boost forward, they're maybe national average. And Stanford's offense, they're probably going to be playing from behind, and Tanner McKee has a big arm. They've either scored or allowed 40 or more points. I think this could be something in the neighborhood like 42-24 Oregon. I think that makes a lot of sense. So I'm going to take the over. That's a late night game as well. Over 63.5. I'd play that through 64.5. Two more quick ones, two underdogs. I'm going to take Arkansas plus 17.5. I think if that kick doesn't hit the top of the upright and come out, this line is not steaming towards 17. I think it's a little bit of an overreaction. I know Jalen Catalon is out for the year for Arkansas, their safety, but Arkansas's offense looks great. KJ Jefferson looks in control. They outgained Texas A&M. If it wasn't for a fumble recovery and, like I said, that field goal doink, oink, whatever you want to call it, I think this line is staying where it opened at around 14. I make Alabama 14, so at home, I'm going to take the Razorbacks. 17.5 is just too much for me. So 17 or above, I'm on Arkansas. And last but not least, Kansas plus 3.5. I faded them last week and covered with Duke at the early number. I'm going back to the well, though, with Kansas plus 3.5 against Iowa State. Kansas top 5 in yards per play. I think they're going to challenge Iowa State at home. Nonetheless, this place has been rocking, and I don't really know how I feel about Iowa State. I mean, they're right around the national average in tackles for loss, so they're not causing a lot of havoc, and I think Jalen Daniels could run a little wild in this game. So getting over a field goal, I like Kansas. His number's been dancing around. So give me, for our best of the rest, Oregon Stanford over 63.5, Arkansas plus 17.5, and Kansas plus 3.5. Parker, if you have any other plays that didn't kind of fit into the segments, feel free. If you have any comments on those plays, chime in, please.
Yeah, I like this place, man. Iowa State is just in a bad situation.
Yeah. You're a Big 12 guy, so I trust your opinion.
Yeah, they just look completely off of the identity that they've wanted to have going forward. Another game that I put a little bit of money on is I like Washington State -4 hosting Cal.
Cool.
I think that Washington State's defense is for real, and Cam Ward as a quarterback is electric. So I think that they'll be able to kind of frustrate Cal. I don't know that Cal has any kind of one thing that they're good at enough to really exploit Washington State and keep up here. So I know betting against Justin Wilcox is always a little dicey, but Pullman, middle of nowhere, hard to get to. I like the magic there. So I like Cal against Washington State as one. Another one that I have circled is, oh gosh, where am I? Purdue, Minnesota. That's when I talk about it in depth on the BetUS show, so I won't spend a ton of time here. But I even without Aiden O'Connell, I think Minnesota is as balanced and explosive as any team in the nation. They really have a good offensive clicking with Tanner Morgan and Mo Ibrahim there. Really, really tough to defend both the pass and the run on the RPO. It's kind of a pick your poison situation. If you can get that under 13, 12.5. I have this at about 14.5, so I would bet it that way as well. So I even if Aiden O'Connell plays, I just don't know that Purdue has the dimensionality on offense to keep up with Minnesota here.
Yeah, great looks. Washington State was on my list. It's one that I didn't get the first pass. It's only Tuesday, so I thought I'd come back. It's sitting at around 4, so I think there's time to get in on this one. I'm a Washington State believer. I thought I have a big Washington State future over win total, and then also I sprinkled some on the Pac-12. So I thought that would get a real shot of life last week, but obviously they can't get it done against Oregon. But I like them against Cal, and I mean, you bring up Minnesota. Zach Jakin chimes in on the chat. 11-1 Minnesota. This is a team I was over on in their win total. I thought that they were the best team heading into the year in the Big Ten West. Things are breaking their way, and it looks like Kirk Soroka back with the Gophers is really proving paying dividends for Tanner Morgan and now a healthy Ibrahim. Listen.
And this is not what was it, 2019 under Fleck? They beat a terrible Fresno State, and they were undefeated 6 games in the season against a really bad slate. Dude, they just went to Michigan State and beat the ever-loving heck out of them. This is a real team. They've got a lot of experience. They're really, really solid in the trenches. I mean, they're very good.
Yeah, this is, I think, the best team in the Big Ten West. So Minnesota, I mean, listen, they're double-digit favorites against a projected contender in Purdue for that division. So Wisconsin on the downswing. Iowa can't pick up a first down without a defense scoop and score. So I think Minnesota 11-1 might be reaching. They do have a big game at Penn State coming up, but this team like over 7.5. I mean, that's in, I think, already. Like I can't see it really falling off here. I think this is an upward trajectory team. So me and Parker kind of aligned with you, Zach, on Minnesota. Maybe not 11-1, but we'll see. As we keep going through the questions, yeah, one game we didn't get to. I'm curious your thoughts here, Parker. Oklahoma State owes Baylor a revenge beatdown. Darrell Turner checks it in the chat. I kind of lean Oklahoma State here. I also kind of like the over. I think these are two sneaky like over teams after last year being more defensive minded. Maybe Blake Shapen kind of figured out some things on offense last week against Iowa State. Where are you seeing this game? Again, I kind of lean towards the Oklahoma State side, off a bye nonetheless.
Yeah, I lean towards Oklahoma State here as well. I think that the Big 12 championship that's stuck in everyone's mind, you got to remember Jalen Warren and two linemen were hurt for Oklahoma State. They really were down and really in a bad situation. Were not able to play the game with Spencer Sanders they wanted to play. This year their stats are a little weird. They let Central Michigan kind of come back, and I think that was Derek Mason challenging some guys. And obviously turnover on defense is hard. Like you just can't replace a Malcolm Rodriguez in 1 year. That's not going to happen. So defense takes a step back. I'd slightly lean towards Oklahoma State in this spot. I think that Baylor averaged like 3.6 yards on their first touchdown drive last week. They got some penalties, and I think Matt Campbell let that go to his head and kind of lost focus there. Iowa State, even as bad as they looked, had their opportunities to win that game. Oklahoma State, I think, is a really solid team, especially on offense. I like their threats downfield. I'd lean slightly to Oklahoma State plus 2.5.
Yeah, I think as a dog, Oklahoma State side, like if they were going to come in like -1, -2, that's where I have this game projected. But if that's where this market was going to open, I wouldn't like that. But I think Spencer Sanders, like you said, he's starting to figure some things out. It seems like the maturity's finally coming in for him. So I kind of like Oklahoma State as an underdog. Again, I kind of like the over. I think you're going to see some fireworks in this game. I think that Shapen, I think that maybe in the Big 12, especially at home, maybe Aranda in the offense, they kind of let him sling a little bit. Like that BYU game, yeah, like an average depth of target of like 4 yards. I mean, they were not letting him move down the field. I think that some confidence might be there a little bit more now after a few games. So maybe they kind of take the training wheels off him. But I do lean towards Oklahoma State. I think they could hit the chunk plays a little bit more. And two more questions, then we'll get out of here. Jerry Freeman asked about Indiana. Are the Hoosiers a worthy dog play against the sliding Cornhuskers? I saw the market moving towards Nebraska. I think it was moving towards like 6. I think you got to take Indiana. I think you do. Like, I don't think the market could adjust for what this Nebraska team is. And I watched that Indiana-Cincinnati game. Indiana in the second half started to figure it out through the air. I know they're not very good. I'm not saying that this is a Big Ten contender or anything, but you're going to favor Nebraska by 6. Why? Like, what has this team shown you that they deserve to be favored, especially in conference play? I just think Indiana, this is a game I'm going to circle back on, but catching this many points, I kind of like the over as well here. I think that Indiana, that was a good second half for them. They hung around that Cincinnati game. They fell behind early and they came back. So I know they didn't cover late, but I think the Hoosiers are a little bit more competitive than that 3-0 like fraudulent start might be giving them credit for.
Yeah, I have Indiana about 42nd, Nebraska about 61st, really drugged down by their defense and some sequencing. So if you're going to bet, yeah, I'd go with the dog here. I just don't, this isn't one that I thought had a strong conviction about.
Yeah. But you agree, though, you think maybe Indiana, like, we know they're bad, but they're not as bad as people might be saying.
Yeah. I think in college football, especially with the pervasive media cycle, you just got to make sure you're not betting memes, you're betting objective data, and they're not very good, but neither is Nebraska. They're not an absolute disaster. So,
yeah. And then last question we'll get to another game. I mean, tons of great games on the slate, and I think we're gonna hit like most of them. But Jerry asked again, is Florida State due for an upset? Wake could be frisky this week, and this is a game that kind of has me all over the place. I think it's got to be Wake or pass. My numbers come out towards the Florida State side because they have really looked good. But I'm also watching the games, and again, this is one where you almost need to pull back. Like, you can look at your numbers and use that as a basis, but you also need to watch the games. Like Mike Norvell, I feel like he's kind of got let off the hook with some of his late game decision making. I kind of trust Sam Hartman a lot more than Jordan Travis. I think this might be back inside of a touchdown, but at 7, I think it's got to be dog or pass here. I think Wake, they showed me something. I really think so against Clemson. This is a team that isn't going to go away easily.
I have this inside of a field goal. I think the big difference is that Wake Forest has kind of two elite receivers, and like A.T. Perry is just excellent, and they're really good at this kind of slow mash RPO. The passing offense has been really efficient. People are really respecting the run. I like Florida State. I think last year they were a little bit undervalued just because I like to look at offense, defense, neutral script, how are you running, how are you playing the ball, and they were actually a little bit better there. A lot of their losses came on nonsense. You could look at the LSU game and say, hey, that's a little bit of nonsense there as well. But yeah, I think that Florida State at like a touchdown at 6.5 is overvalued here.
Yeah.
I would take Wake in some points.
Yeah, this one opened at like a pick'em, and it just flew Florida State's way. And I agree, Florida State should be favored in the game. Florida State, this is not what Florida State's been in recent years, but why are we just discrediting Wake all of a sudden, just getting off the bandwagon? I mean, they just went toe-to-toe with Clemson. I think that they could get off the mat and stay close here. Another game, I'm not sure about the weather, but this may be a game you just want to keep your eye on the weather, just with that hurricane coming through. I think it's passing Florida by then, but just something to keep an eye on as we get going. But great questions. Thank you to everyone who chimed in the chat. Let's get that recap graphic up just in case anyone tuned in late. Parker went with NC State plus 6.5 versus Clemson in our game of the week. Oklahoma against his beloved TCU, laying 7. Washington -3 against UCLA. Took Illinois plus 7 against Wisconsin, and Duke laying 2 against Virginia. I went with the over in Clemson, NC State. We'll see if I can make it through the hurricane. TCU catching 7 against Oklahoma. Middle Tennessee plus 4 against UTSA. Navy plus 14 against Air Force. San Jose State -2.5 against Wyoming. And that is a whole bunch of bets for you on a Tuesday. We really went through everything there. So, Parker, I really appreciate you coming on, man. And, again, if you want to follow him on Twitter, @StatsOWar, he's one of the best in the business. His infographics are incredibly insightful. They're awesome. And check out his show on BetUS on YouTube right now. You could see all his picks for the week. And if you want to see more of my plays, you can go to my bet stamp @RW33. And if you just want to subscribe to our podcast form too, you can go see that on any of your Apple and Android podcast platforms. Big shout out to Joanne Woodcock, our producer behind the scenes. And until then, until week 6, have a profitable college football weekend. Best of luck, everybody.